Welcome back to Rhino Fundamentals. Today, this is going to be sort of a very fundamental video. We're just going to be looking at the interface of the Rhino, the Rhino interface. We're just going to be talking a little bit about the panels, and we're going to be talking about some really interesting stuff with the object snaps. There's some hidden features down here that I wanted to talk about that can definitely make your modeling process a lot more efficient. So let's just start off by talking about the panels. This is sort of just my approach to like how I've set it up and how I work the most efficiently. So I just want to show you my methodology, and then you can kind of extract that and do whatever you need to do to work the most efficiently on your side. So starting off up here, I mean the command panel. I try to make that as short as possible so that I have room for all these icons, and I want a little bit of depth here so that I can see the last few lines in the command history. I find that to be useful when you're measuring stuff or you just want to see what happened 5 lines back. So that's why I have that pulled down, because basically we're trying to get as much real estate onto the graphic display. So it's always a compromise, but we're always compromising between this display and our panels, but sometimes we need to give room for certain things in the panels so that we can function correctly. So another example there is that I think by default the properties panel is combined up here into tabs, and but I was finding that I was going back and forth between layers and object properties, because I want to, if I want to organize like certain objects into certain layers, one way to do that is to go into object properties and then select your layer down here. But I find it to be pretty inefficient to be going back and forth between these tabs. So I think it's better to you can do one or two things. If you don't have too many layers, I would just put the properties down here, and then you have access to you can change the layers that way. But I have a lot of layers and I don't like scrolling down that much, so for me it works best to put the properties beside it. And then I also have access to the lens length and the camera location and all that stuff at the same time, and I have access to the layers at all times. So that having these side by side works best for my workflow, and that's mostly what I want to talk about with the panels. And now let's just talk about these the Osnap and the Ortho and that type of thing. So when it comes to some of these things like gumball, I usually have gumball turned off. You can check that out. I'm not the right person to sort of talk about gumball, but you can watch a tutorial about that. It's definitely a good feature for certain types of modeling. I haven't found it to be very useful for my modeling style. I like using hotkeys and numbers and stuff like that, so it doesn't work great for me, but you should check that out and see if that's something that you can use. So I have that turned off. And when it comes to Gridsnap is something you could use. I've never used it, but Gridsnap will basically snap all your points to any of your points to a grid. Right now I think the grid is one unit, so that's just 1 millimeter, and you could make that grid different. I've never used it. I don't. It would be useful for a different type of modeling again. In terms of ortho, I always have ortho on. This is my strategy behind it. I have ortho on all the time so that I'm always locked on to my X and Y axes. And if I hold shift, then I am not locked on to those X and Y axes. So you don't have to turn it off to necessarily to get unlocked. And but if I hold shift, I'm not locked to the X and Y, but I am locked still to my object snaps. But if I hold shift and I hold alt, then I'm not locked onto anything, including the object snaps. So that would be helpful if we have, you know, like a picture and we need to we have to trace a picture, and there could be objects around it too. So if we hold shift and we hold alt, then we can easily we have a lot of control over where our points are going, and it's not locking onto anything. So that's something that you might want to use. That's a just generally a good workflow to use. And the object snap, I mean, I pretty much have object snap on all the time, because again, if you don't need that, you just hold alt and you don't have any object snaps anymore. But generally, you're probably going to be using object snaps. And so let's just talk about object snaps. This is a really useful panel down here, and there's a few hidden features that you don't even see, that we'll talk about in a minute. So what are these object snaps? Each one will snap to a certain type of geometry in a certain type of way. So if we're starting to draw a curve, for example, endpoint object snap will snap to the end point of a curve, and that obviously has a lot of different uses. And then, you know, near object snap would be useful to snap onto any part of this line. So if we don't have that turned on, then we can only snap to the endpoint, but we can't snap to any other part of the line except for the midpoint, because we have mid object snap. But I should say now that there's another way that we can kind of make midpoint object snaps. It's hard to say. So for example, if I want to make a point in between these two lines, what I can do is I can go anywhere on that line. I press Control, make a little white point, and then it will also lock me onto like an orthographic lock in reference to that point. And then I can bring that across to this line, and I can press Control again, make sure that it's, you know, locked onto that. And now I have these two white points, and I can make a point that's a midpoint between those 2 points. So that's super useful. I use that feature a lot. And I should note that if you're making these little white points and you accidentally make too many of them, you're not going to be able to find a midpoint anymore, because now there's 3 points. If that happens, you don't need to end the command. Just hit Control twice, and all of them will disappear, and then you can go back and make your points again, or you can go over it and press Control again to get rid of it. So those are 2 different things that you can do. But sometimes there's just too many points that are building up, and you just need to clear them all out, and you can just hit Control twice to clear them out. And so yeah, okay. So continuing on with these points. You know, you can just go through these and look at different types of object snaps, and determine whether you want them on or off, depending on your modeling style and what you do. I have most of them on all the time. But this is where it gets kind of cool. There's a few other things that you can do with this that aren't super obvious. Okay, so let's say that we modeled this control knob and we want to fit it onto this potentiometer shaft. What we can do here is there's 2 different methods that we can use. If we're just going to do this once, we can select the center point here. So we have the initial center point, and then we need our secondary, our destination center point. And we can fit it onto this center point, but there's a lot of other kind of interference. I'm getting midpoints, I'm getting near points, end points. We can do is we can hold shift and then click center, and basically we just turned on center snap for sort of a one-shot deal. So now only center point is is activated, and we're not getting interference from midpoints or endpoints or anything like that. So we know that we hit that center point, and we know that the control knob is exactly where it needs to be. The other way to do that, if we don't want kind of that one-shot deal, if we have a bunch of these that we need to kind of put onto center points or something like that, what we can do is right-click center, and it will turn off everything except the center point, the center object snap. So again, that was right-click, and now only center object snap is available, and it will stay like that until we right-click it again. And this is what's cool. It will turn on all the other ones that were on before, but only the ones that were on before. So we don't have to go and turn them all on manually. So those are two little features that are going to be super useful. And the other thing that we have here, another hidden feature, if you hold Control, you can see that there's a little hidden panel down here. So let's say this is sort of a unique object snap feature. Let's say we wanted to make a line that's tangent to we want a point that is tangent to some part of this circle. So what we could do is hold Control, and then we can do tangent from. Okay, and then we're going to select the curve that we want to be tangent from, and then we're going to select a point, and now the next point on that curve is locked onto an axis that is tangent to that part of the circle that we selected, and then we can do anything that we want with that curve. And the other thing, one other example, is if we want the next point on this curve to end up on this circle, if there's other interference or something, we could go on curve, and then the next point we select the circle, and then the next point is going to be locked onto some part of this curve, and it can't be anywhere else. So that's pretty cool. If you know your point is going to be on that curve, you can select that, and you can avoid any kind of interference with other curves or something like that. So there's a bunch of useful tools down there. You can just go through and get familiar with these object snaps down here. So those are the basic things that I wanted to share with you that will hopefully make your modeling process a little bit faster, or a lot faster. I think there's a lot of cool features down there. Let me know if you have any questions, or if you have any other methods that you know about that might be related to this type of thing. I'm always interested in, this is a work in progress. I'm always interested in ways to get more efficient. So I hope that video was helpful. Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you guys in the next video.